I remember the way the room felt that night, warm from the golden lights, thick with the sound of applause, and yet somehow, freezing cold in the corner where my father sat. I was standing on stage at the Grand Hyatt Ballroom, holding a crystal trophy that caught every shimmer of the chandelier. The MC had just finished announcing me as the youngest self-made millionaire in the country's e-commerce industry. Cameras flashed, journalists scribbled notes, and strangers were cheering my name, but my eyes kept drifting to him. My father sitting stiffly at the back table, jaw tight, looking like he'd just bitten into something sour. I could almost hear the ghost of his words from years earlier. Selling trinkets online is not a real job, Emma. Stop wasting your life. If anyone in that room knew the full story, they'd know that the girl standing in designer heels wasn't born into wealth, didn't marry into it, and sure as hell didn't inherit it. No, I built it from scratch, pixel by pixel, box by box, while my own father laughed behind my back. But before the applause, before the press coverage, before the $42 million, there was just me, a second-hand laptop, and a dream everyone thought was pathetic. I grew up in a household where success was measured by a very strict checklist my father liked to repeat at every dinner table conversation. Be a doctor, be a lawyer, be an engineer, or, if all else fails, marry someone who is. Anything outside those three or that one backup plan was apparently a waste of potential. From as early as I can remember, I wanted to create things, not just art, but products. When I was 12, I designed friendship bracelets and sold them at school for $1 each. By 15, I was hand-painting thrifted denim jackets and selling them on Instagram. Every time my father saw me hunched over my desk, sewing, sketching, or photographing items, he'd sigh like I was breaking his heart. "You're smart enough for medical school, Emma," he'd say. "Why throw it away for this nonsense?" My mother stayed quiet most of the time. She didn't agree with him entirely, but she'd never dare contradict him out loud. My older brother, Brian, was the golden child, straight engineering student, already lined up for a high-paying job before graduation. And then there was me, the creative one, which in my father's dictionary meant the one who'll never make money. After college, things got worse. I graduated with a degree in marketing, not medicine, not law, not engineering, and I didn't even try to get a corporate job. Instead, I rented a tiny one-bedroom apartment, ordered wholesale products online, and started building an e-commerce store on my second-hand laptop. I was obsessed up until most nights, learning about SEO, product photography, email marketing, customer service. I taught myself how to design packaging and even how to negotiate with overseas suppliers. To me, it was exciting. To my father, it was a joke. "So, let me get this straight," he said one Sunday afternoon, arms folded, leaning against the kitchen doorway. "You sit at home all day on your computer, hoping strangers will send you money? That's your plan?" I nodded, trying to stay calm. "It's more than that, Dad. It's scalable. I can reach people all over the world, not just in one city." He laughed, an ugly, sharp laugh that still makes my stomach turn when I think about it. "Scalable? Emma, what you have is a hobby, a fake job, and one day you're going to regret wasting your 20s on this nonsense." I wish I could say his words rolled off me like water, but they didn't. They sank in deep, like cold stones in my chest, and yet in some twisted way they also lit a fire. Because in that moment, standing in my mother's kitchen while my father smirked at me like I was chasing a fantasy, I made myself a silent promise. One day, I'd make sure he ate those words. If you'd told me back then that one day would involve me interviewing him for a job he desperately needed, I wouldn't have believed you. But that day was coming. The first year of my e-commerce business was brutal, and not in the it was hard, but I learned a lot kind of way. I mean soul-crushing, self-doubt inducing. I'm eating instant noodles 3 times a day brutal. I started with a few $100s I'd saved from a short internship during college. I thought it would be enough to get going, buy some inventory, set up my website, and run ads. I was wrong. Shipping costs ate into my profits like termites in a wooden house. Customers would order something and then demand a refund because the shipping took too long or because the product wasn't exactly what they expected. I'd spend entire nights responding to angry emails and then cry quietly into my pillow so my downstairs neighbors wouldn't hear. Meanwhile, my father kept calling to check in, except he didn't really check in, he just wanted updates so he could measure my failure. One evening, I picked up the phone after a long day of packing orders. My apartment looked like a shipping center exploded in it, boxes everywhere, tape stuck to the walls, bubble wrap clinging to my clothes. "So, how's the fake job today?" he asked, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "It's not fake, Dad. I shipped 15 orders today," I replied, forcing a cheerful tone. 15? He chuckled. "Emma, real businesses handle hundreds a day. But sure, keep playing your little game. Maybe one day you'll win a prize for most bubble wrap used in a year." I bit my tongue so hard I could taste blood. If I snapped, it would only prove his point that I was too emotional for the real world. By month 6, I'd learned how to use social media better. One of my product photos went semi-viral on Pinterest, nothing huge, but enough to drive a few hundred extra visitors to my store. That week, I made $1,200 in profit. It felt like winning the lottery. I took myself out for a cheap sushi dinner just to celebrate, even though it meant I'd be eating cereal for breakfast for the next few days. I didn't tell my father. It wasn't worth the eye roll, but I did tell my mom over the phone late one night. She sounded happy, but in the way someone does when they're not sure they should be. "That's wonderful, honey. I'm glad you're doing what you love." Translation: I'm proud, but your father wouldn't approve, so let's keep this between us. The real breaking point that year happened at my cousin Leah's engagement party. Everyone was there: cousins, aunts, uncles, family, friends. And of course, my father, who was holding court at one of the round tables like he always did. At one point, Aunt Linda asked me what I was doing these days. Before I could answer, my father jumped in. "Oh, Emma, she sells trinkets online. Thinks she's running a business." A few people chuckled. My cheeks burned, but I kept my smile plastered on. "Actually, I began. It's an e-commerce store. I've been learning about digital marketing and international." "International?" he interrupted, laughing so loud that people turned their heads. "She means she ships a couple of keychains to Canada and thinks she's Amazon." I felt the laughter ripple around the table like cold water being poured over me. I laughed along because what else could I do? But inside, something hardened. I realized in that moment that I didn't just want to succeed. I wanted to succeed. So loudly, so undeniably that he wouldn't be able to reduce me to a joke ever again. After that night, I worked harder than ever. I cut expenses to the bone. I learned about dropshipping to avoid upfront inventory costs. I created a second brand under a different name so I could experiment with higher-end products. I stopped talking about my business to my family entirely. To them, I probably looked like I was coasting along in my little fake job bubble. But behind the scenes, something was starting to shift. Orders were coming in more steadily. I was making enough to pay my rent on time every month. My ads were starting to actually convert instead of eating up my budget. And late one night, as I stared at my laptop, watching my sales dashboard tick up by another order from someone in France, I whispered to myself, "This is just the beginning." It started with a message from a lifestyle blogger named Chloe Rivers. At the time, I didn't even know how big she was. I just saw she had over 500,000 Instagram followers and thought, there's no way she's even going to open my email. But she did. And she replied with 6 words that changed everything. "Sure, I'd love to feature it." It was my newest product, a line of minimalist, eco-friendly planners that I'd spent weeks designing. I didn't have the money to pay for a big influencer promotion, so I offered to send her a free package with custom designs in exchange for a mention. 2 weeks later, she posted an unboxing video. It wasn't even a sponsored ad, just her genuine reaction to loving the planner. I woke up to my phone buzzing so much it nearly slid off my nightstand. My email inbox was full of order confirmations. My Shopify dashboard looked like it was on fire, little cha-ching sounds going off every few minutes. By the end of that day, I'd sold out my entire stock. For the first time since starting my business, I saw 5 figures in my bank account. I just sat there, staring at the screen, my mouth open, hands shaking, and the best part, I didn't tell my father a single thing. To him, I was still the daughter playing shop in her apartment. To me, I was now running a legitimate business that had just gone international overnight. The following weeks were chaos in the best way. I reinvested almost everything, restocked inventory, hired a virtual assistant, improved my website, and started experimenting with Facebook ads. I didn't splurge on anything except for a decent ergonomic chair because my back was starting to hate me, but the orders kept rolling in. First from the US, then Canada, the UK, Australia, and eventually even Singapore and the way. I was waking up to sales from time zones I'd never even considered. One night, I checked my phone at AM and realized I had made more money while sleeping than my father did in an entire week at his office job. I laughed into the darkness, then immediately felt guilty for enjoying that thought. But it wasn't about beating him. Not yet. It was about proving to myself that I wasn't crazy for believing in this. I kept my success quiet at home. Family dinners became a game of dodging questions. If my father asked, "How's the fake job?" I'd shrug and say, "It's fine," before changing the subject. I didn't know him details. Not after the way he'd humiliated me at Leah's party. Then came Thanksgiving. It was the first holiday in years where I didn't dread being around my family. I knew something they didn't, that the fake job had brought in just over $250,000 in profit that year. To the table, my father went on about Brian's new promotion and my cousin's engagement. He didn't ask me about my business, and I didn't bring it up. I just passed the mashed potatoes and smiled. But then my uncle made a comment about how kids these days all want to be influencers and laughed. My father smirked and said, "Or run fake online stores." I could feel every muscle in my jaw tighten, but I didn't bite. Not yet, because one day, I'd be sitting across from him with numbers so undeniable that even he couldn't turn them into a joke. What I didn't know then was that day was going to come sooner than I thought, and it wouldn't be in the way I'd imagined. The year after Chloe's post felt like living inside a whirlwind. Orders came faster than I could process them, so I upgraded from my little one-bedroom apartment to a small warehouse space. It wasn't glamorous, just a concrete floored building on the edge of town with rattling vents and fluorescent lights that hummed a little too loud. But to me, it was heaven. For the first time, I had a proper packing station, organized shelves, and a dedicated office corner where I could actually close a door and think. Within 6 months, my revenue crossed the $1 million mark. I stared at the number like it was a foreign language. $1 million had always been something abstract like movie money, not real-life money. But here it was, in my accounting software, attached to my name. I hired 2 part-time employees, then a third. We started designing custom packaging. My planner line expanded into stationery, tote bags, and even desk organizers. Every time I launched something new, it sold out faster than the last. And still, my family didn't know. I kept my life looking average on the outside. Same car, same simple clothes, no luxury handbags or flashy jewelry. The only hint, if anyone was paying close attention, was that I'd stopped talking about money stress altogether. It was around then that I started noticing changes in my father. He was a man who'd built his entire identity around being the one in control, the one with the good job, the stable income, the financial authority in the family. But I started hearing little snippets from my mom: a failed investment here, a dip in his retirement account there, one Sunday lunch. While my father was outside taking a phone call, Mom leaned across the table and whispered, "Don't say I told you, but your dad's company's cutting costs. He's worried." I felt a complicated swirl of emotions. Part of me wanted to feel sorry for him. The other part, the louder part, remembered every smirk, every laugh, every time he'd called my work pretend. That summer, my business hit $5 million in total sales. I invested heavily in automation, launched an affiliate program, and started manufacturing my own products instead of relying on wholesalers. It meant bigger margins and more control. The only people I celebrated with were my team and a few friends from the small business community. My father didn't even get a congratulatory text because, well, he didn't know. And then, in early spring, something happened that made me sit up and pay attention. I was scrolling through job applications for a new marketing assistant role when I saw a name I knew by heart. My father's single quotes S.T first. I thought it had to be a coincidence, but no, there it was. His full name, his email address, his old job listed, and a cover letter explaining that he was seeking new opportunities in a growing company. My hand froze on the mouse. He had applied for a job at my company. I must have read his name 20 times, just to be sure I wasn't imagining it. It was surreal, seeing my father's resume sitting there among 100 others. He'd applied for the marketing assistant position, an entry-level role. The man who'd once mocked my work ethic and told me I needed to get serious was now looking for a job in the very industry he had spent years ridiculing. The cover letter was polite, almost stiff, but there was something underneath. A tone of desperation, maybe. He'd mentioned being open to new challenges and eager to adapt to emerging business models. Emerging business models. Like the fake job he'd made fun of for years. I sat back in my chair, staring at the screen. My first instinct was to hit delete. No interview, no conversation, just remove him from the list like he'd once dismissed me from his idea of real careers. But then another thought crept in. What if I didn't delete it? What if I invited him in for an interview, not to humiliate him, but to let him see with his own eyes exactly what I had built? The more I thought about it, the more it felt like closure. Not revenge in the petty sense, but justice. He'd get to see the world I had fought to create, the one he'd said would never amount to anything. That night, I called my mom. Hey, Mom, is Dad okay? I mean, really okay? I asked, trying to sound casual. She hesitated. He's been having a hard time. The company let a lot of people go. He's been looking for work, but it's not like it used to be. He's embarrassed. The word sat heavy in my chest. I knew that feeling, years of it. But I also knew this was my chance to turn the tables, and I wasn't going to waste it. The next morning, I sent him an interview invite. I didn't sign it with my name, it came from our HR email account. I wanted him to walk in without knowing who was behind it. The days leading up to the interview were strange. My team didn't know yet, so I just went about my work like normal. Inside, though, I was replaying every moment from my past, every sarcastic comment, every family dinner where I'd been made the punchline, and now I'd be the one sitting across from him on the morning of the interview. I arrived early, wearing a navy suit that made me feel like a CEO because I was. My office was spotless, my desk neatly arranged, my laptop open to the interview questions I'd prepared. I heard his voice in the lobby before I saw him, still confident, still trying to project control, but I caught a thin layer of strain underneath when the receptionist opened my door and ushered him in. His face was a perfect picture of confusion. "Emma," he said, stopping halfway to the chair. I smiled. "Hello, Dad. Please, have a seat." For a moment, he just stood there, like his brain was buffering. The man who had always been quick with words suddenly had none. I gestured to the chair across from my desk. "Please sit." He lowered himself into it slowly, never breaking eye contact. What is this?" he finally asked. "This," I said evenly, "is your interview for the marketing assistant position at my company." His eyebrows shot up. "Your company?" "Yes, Dad. My e-commerce company. The one you called a fake job." The silence that followed was delicious. In a way I'd never admit out loud. He looked around my office, his eyes taking in the awards on the shelf, the framed articles from business magazines, the sleek packaging samples displayed like art pieces. His gaze lingered on a photo of me with my team at last year's holiday party, 12 smiling faces in branded hoodies. "You built all of this?" he asked, his voice quieter now. "Yes, from my fake job." For a few seconds, he didn't speak. I could see the wheels turning in his head, connecting the dots, all the years I'd been quiet, the moments I'd dodged his questions, the way I'd never fought to prove him wrong with words, because I was doing it with actions. I leaned forward slightly. "Tell me, Dad, why are you applying for this position?" He hesitated, clearing his throat. "My company downsized. I've been looking for something new. It's harder out there than I expected." "I see," I said, keeping my tone professional. "And what makes you interested in working here?" He looked down at his hands. "It's a growing industry." I thought maybe I could learn something new. There it was, the tiniest crack in his pride. "Well," I said, sitting back, "you're right. It is a growing industry. In fact, last year we processed over 500,000 orders worldwide." His eyes widened slightly, but he said nothing. I could have humiliated him right then. I could have reminded him of every insult, every laugh, every time he'd called me foolish. But instead, I kept it businesslike. "Dad, I don't think this role would be the best fit for you, but I appreciate that you applied." He nodded slowly, like he was absorbing not just my words but the entire situation. "Emma, I was wrong," he said finally. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud, but it was the first time in my life I'd heard those words from him, and it landed harder than any public apology ever could. When he left, I sat in my chair for a long time, staring at the closed door. Part of me felt vindicated. Another part felt unexpectedly sad, because now that he finally respected what I'd built, I wasn't sure if I even needed his approval anymore. The months that followed were unlike anything I had experienced before. It felt like the air had shifted, thicker, charged, like the moment before a thunderstorm. My business was no longer just doing well. It was soaring. We had secured contracts with 2 major international distributors, and sales exploded in regions I hadn't even targeted. The numbers coming in from my finance dashboard were surreal. Some days, I'd sit in my office, sipping coffee, staring at the figures with a mix of disbelief and quiet pride. $42 million in net worth wasn't just a number, it was a fortress. The same fortress I had been building quietly, while my father scoffed at me for playing with my laptop. But here's the thing: success doesn't silence everyone. Sometimes, it makes the critics louder. I found out through my cousin that my dad had been telling relatives I just got lucky and that online money isn't real money. The words were almost comical, but they still stung. You'd think the proof would be enough. That my stability, my independence, the way I'd created jobs for others, would earn at least a nod of respect. But with my dad, respect was a currency he refused to spend on me. One night, Mom called. Her voice was softer than usual. "He's struggling to understand," she said. "You've always been different. You didn't follow the path he knew, and it scares him." I wanted to say, "It's not fear, it's ego." But I bit my tongue. Then came the twist I didn't see coming. My father called me directly for the first time in months. His tone was hesitant, like he was chewing on something bitter. He wanted me to attend a family business dinner at the country club. Family business dinner. That phrase made my stomach tighten. When I arrived, it wasn't just family. Several of his business associates were there, people I recognized from old photos. Men in tailored suits, women with diamond bracelets that caught the light when they moved their wine glasses. And in the middle of the dinner, my father stood up, cleared his throat, and said words I would never forget. "My daughter runs an online store, and despite what I used to think, she's done okay for herself. Okay for herself." That was his version of praise. But then he turned to me, in front of everyone, and said, "You know, with your marketing skills, maybe you could help us with our family business. We've been struggling with online outreach." It hit me like a slap. The man who called my business fake was now asking me to use it to prop up his failing empire. I looked at him, and I smiled. But it wasn't the smile he was expecting, because in that moment, I realized the revenge wasn't about money. It was about choosing whether or not to give him what he suddenly wanted from me, and I had already made up my mind. By the time I returned to town, the entire community was buzzing with rumors. Apparently, my father's big business deal had collapsed spectacularly, thanks to a chain reaction no one saw coming, well, except me. Without his shady investment funds, The investors had pulled out, suppliers were refusing credit, and even his so-called friends were dodging his calls. I walked into my favorite cafe, the one I used to avoid when my family was around because they'd show up uninvited to check in on me. The owner, Mrs. Patel, greeted me warmly. "Ah, the prodigal daughter returns," she teased, sliding a cup of chai across the counter. "Your father came in last week. He didn't even have the money to pay for his own coffee." Left red-faced, I sipped slowly, savoring not just the drink, but the satisfaction. "Times change," I said, and they had dramatically. Later that afternoon, my phone buzzed with a call from my younger brother, Daniel, the one family member who had always tried to stay neutral. "Look," he began hesitantly, "Mom and Dad are, well, they're not doing great. Dad says you've been making moves to sabotage him. Is that true?" I paused, letting the silence stretch until it was uncomfortable. "Daniel, I don't sabotage. I protect myself. And if their empire crumbles because they built it on lies and stolen trust, that's not my doing, it's karma." He exhaled heavily. "They want to meet with you, face to face. Maybe to make amends. Maybe to he cut himself off. Maybe to manipulate me again." I finished. "Not happening." But later that night, lying in bed, I thought about it. The part of me that still craved answers, still wanted them to admit what they'd done, stirred. So I sent Daniel a text. "Fine. One meeting. Neutral ground. My rules." When the day came, I chose the venue, a glass-walled conference room at a co-working space. I arrived early, dressed sharply, with documents neatly stacked in front of me. They walked in looking older, wearier. My mother's perfect hair was a little frizzier than usual. My father's confident stride was slower. They sat down without the usual smug smiles. Dad spoke first. "We made mistakes. I didn't let him get far." "Mistakes? You stole from me. You used my savings to fund your luxury trip while I was recovering in a hospital bed. And then you cut me out of the family business I helped build." My mother's eyes darted to the documents in front of me. "What are those?" I slid them across the table. "The official transfer of the remaining family assets into my name. You sign, and you keep your dignity. Refuse, and I release everything: emails, bank records, witness statements to the press." Their faces drained of color. "You wouldn't," my father said, but his voice lacked conviction. "I would," I said quietly, "and you know I can." The room was silent except for the scratching of pens on paper when they finally pushed the signed documents back toward me. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel pity either. Just closure. I stood, gathering the papers. "This isn't revenge," I told them. "This is justice, and it's long overdue." Then I walked out, leaving them in that glass room with nothing but the reflections of what they'd lost. The day of the charity gala arrived with the kind of tense energy that buzzes in your skin before a thunderstorm. I stood before the mirror, in my hotel suite, adjusting the sapphire blue gown that clung to my curves. The dress wasn't just fashion, it was a statement. The color matched a ribbon I wore for the Domestic Abuse Survivors Foundation I'd been quietly funding for the past year. As I slipped on my earrings, I couldn't help but think about how different this night was compared to the last time I'd been at one of my parents' public events. Back then, I was the invisible daughter, dressed modestly, blending into the background while my sister Clara basked in the spotlight. Tonight, though, the spotlight was mine whether they liked it or not. The venue was already glowing when I arrived. Chandeliers glittered overhead, the air thick with perfume, money, and fake politeness. I caught sight of my parents by the entrance, shaking hands with donors, their smiles fixed like porcelain masks. Clara stood beside them in a gold dress, her arm looped through her fiancé Daniel's. I recognized the diamond necklace around her neck. It had been my grandmother's, and my mother had promised it to me years ago. Seeing it on Clara's throat sent a cold, sharp twist through my chest. When I approached, my mother's smile faltered for the briefest second before she leaned in for the obligatory air kiss. "You look different," she said, scanning me like I was a painting she wasn't sure she liked. "I'd hope so," I replied, my tone sweet enough to be mistaken for polite. "It's been a transformative year." Daniel greeted me with a stiff nod. his jaw tight. He knew exactly why I was here, and it wasn't just for charity. Clara smirked, leaning closer. Don't cause a scene, okay? This night is important. For Mom and Dad's image. Oh, I wouldn't dream of ruining their perfect image, I said, letting my words hang in the air like smoke. Inside the ballroom, the evening moved through the expected motions: cocktails, speeches, applause. I kept to the edges of the crowd, speaking with a few allies I'd made in the business world, people my parents thought I was too timid to ever network with. Every so often, I caught my father glancing my way, his brow furrowed, as if he was trying to piece together my new confidence. Halfway through dinner, the auction began. My parents had donated a few lavish items to show their generosity: private yacht trips, diamond bracelets, signed art pieces. But when the auctioneer announced the final item of the night, a hush fell over the room. It was a land deed prime property in the heart of the city, donated anonymously. The auctioneer explained that the proceeds would go entirely to the Survivors Foundation. As the bidding began, I stood up, my heels clicking against the marble floor as I walked toward the stage. I'd like to make a clarification, I said, my voice carrying through the microphone the auctioneer handed me. The donor isn't anonymous. That property belongs to me. A murmur rippled through the crowd. My parents' faces froze. Clara's wine glass paused halfway to her lips. This land, I continued, was acquired through my own investments I built while being told I wasn't capable, while being told I'd never amount to anything. I let my gaze sweep over my family's table. And tonight, every cent from its sale will go to survivors who were silenced, overlooked, and underestimated, just like I was. The applause started hesitantly, then grew into a standing ovation. Cameras flashed, reporters scribbled, and my parents sat rigid, trapped in their seats, knowing any reaction would be captured. As the auctioneer resumed, I stepped down from the stage and walked past their table. My father's eyes burned into me, but I only smiled. Don't worry, I said softly. This is just the beginning. I didn't look back as I left the ballroom, the sound of the gavel marking the sale echoing behind me like a victory drum. The days after the gala were a whirlwind. News outlets picked up the story: the daughter who had been written off by her family, who had quietly amassed a $42 million empire and was now donating a fortune to charity. Social media buzzed with admiration, but behind the scenes, things were boiling over in my family. My father, once so proud and imperious, retreated into silence. His business partners started distancing themselves, whispering behind closed doors about his loss of control. My mother tried to hold the facade together, but the strain showed in her tired eyes and forced smiles. Clara called me once, her voice trembling. You've destroyed everything Mom and Dad worked for. How could you? I let the silence stretch before I answered. I didn't destroy it, Clara. They did that all by themselves. My brother Daniel reached out too, but this time with a different tone: cautious, almost pleading. Can we talk? For the family's sake? I hesitated. Family had meant betrayal and silence for so long. But maybe this was the moment to rewrite that story. When we met, I saw the weariness in his eyes, the fear that the family might truly be falling apart. I told him, I'm not here to break us apart, Daniel. I want to build something better on honesty, respect, and trust. It was a fragile start, but the first real conversation we'd had in years. Meanwhile, my business was thriving. The donations from the land auction helped expand the Survivors Foundation, and I was invited to speak at conferences about resilience and entrepreneurship. Each speech was a chance to share my story: the struggles, the rejection, and ultimately, the triumph. Yet, despite all this, a part of me remained wary. The past had taught me that people change when the tides turn, but not always for the better. I kept my circle tight, my trust guarded, and as I stood on the stage during one of those talks, looking out at an audience of thousands, I knew one thing for sure. I had come too far to let anyone, even family, drag me back. As I look back on everything: the laughter, the tears, the battles fought silently behind closed doors, I realized this journey wasn't just about proving my father wrong. It was about proving to myself that my worth was never defined by anyone else's expectations. Success isn't just measured in numbers or titles. It's measured in resilience, in the courage to keep going when no one believes in you, and in the grace to rise above bitterness and choose your own path. My story is proof that sometimes the biggest obstacles come from the people who should love us most. But those obstacles can become the stepping stones to our greatest victories. So, if you're watching this and feeling overlooked, underestimated, or doubted, remember this: your dreams are valid, your hustle is real, and your future is yours to build. Thank you for sharing this journey with me. Until next time, keep believing in yourself and never let anyone dim your light.